Wendy Osefo, it was 7 counts of insurance fraud, 8 counts of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and 1 count of false statement to a police officer.
You won't believe what just happened inside the courtroom today. Wendy Osefo, once the picture of poise and power, crumbled before everyone's eyes, tears streaming down her face as she faced the consequences of the fraud scandal that shook her empire. The whispers, the rumors, the months of build-up all led to this moment, her voice breaking, hands trembling, as she apologized not just to the court, but to the victims she deceived. This wasn't just a courtroom scene. It was a dramatic unraveling of a carefully constructed life, a reality star stripped bare, forced to confront the fallout of her actions in front of the world. People are asking, was this genuine remorse or a desperate attempt to save what little remains of her reputation? Every word she spoke, every sob that escaped her, sent shockwaves through the room, and social media is already exploding. What happens next? The answers are darker and more complicated than anyone could imagine. Wendy Osefo walked into the courtroom like a woman carrying the weight of the world. The usual confidence, the poised smile she once flashed on red carpets and reality TV screens was gone. Every step felt heavy, almost reluctant, like she knew that each footfall was carrying her closer to judgment, not just from the law, but from the public eye that had once idolized her. The room was packed. Journalists, lawyers, and spectators whispered as her heels clicked against the polished floor, the sound echoing like a countdown to the moment she would finally face the consequences of the fraud scandal that had been haunting her for months. As she approached the stand, Wendy's hands trembled. She clutched a folded piece of paper, her prepared statement, but the crumpled edges betrayed how many times she had read and reread it, hoping the words could somehow protect her. Her husband, Edward Osefo, sat beside her, rigid, face stern, yet the subtle twitch in his jaw suggested even he felt the tremor of reality pressing down. For months, the couple had navigated the public scrutiny, the mounting lawsuits, and the pressure of an empire built on deception. But today, all pretenses were stripped away. The judge called the court to order. Silence fell. Wendy took a deep breath, trying to summon the strength she had always projected to millions on TV. Her eyes scanned the room, catching the faces of people she had defrauded, investors, former colleagues, and everyday people who had trusted her. Each stare, each subtle glare, felt like a needle, pricking through the armor she had worn for so long. And then it happened. The words, rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind, started tumbling out, trembling, faltering. I want to say I'm sorry, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, cracking almost immediately. The room shifted uncomfortably. It was rare to see someone like Wendy, always so strong, so commanding, exposed like this. I know I hurt so many people. I thought I was. I thought I could handle everything, but I was wrong. A hush fell. Even Edward shifted in his seat, glancing at her with a mixture of concern and disbelief. One of the victims, a middle-aged woman who had invested her savings, let out a shaky breath, as if finally hearing the apology she had been waiting for, yet unsure if it could undo the damage. I never meant for this to go this far, Wendy continued, tears streaking her carefully made-up face. I made choices, bad choices, and I accept responsibility. I failed my family, I failed my team, and I failed anyone who trusted me. Her voice quivered now louder, filled with raw emotion that couldn't be contained. Each word carried weight, the kind of weight that made everyone in the courtroom sit up and listen, even those who had once admired her from afar. The prosecution remained silent, watching, taking notes, yet their eyes betrayed the subtle satisfaction of witnessing someone finally confront the consequences they had long tried to evade. The defense attorney shifted nervously in his chair, glancing at Wendy and Edward, clearly hoping the public display of remorse might influence the court's leniency. Edward finally spoke, breaking the tense quiet, his voice low and steady. We know the trust we broke can't be repaired overnight, but we are committed to making things right as best we can. I support Wendy, and we will do whatever the court requires. There was no applause. There was no relief. Only the undeniable reality that the couple's carefully curated lives were unraveling in real time. A court clerk passed papers across the bench, financial statements, audit reports, and testimony documents that chronicled the elaborate scheme that had fooled so many. Wendy's eyes darted across them, recognizing familiar names, faces, and transactions, each a reminder of the magnitude of her actions. A witness was called next, a former business partner who had first raised the alarm about the questionable investments. "We trusted her," the man said, voice shaking. "We believed in the vision she sold us. And in the end, we lost everything. Every cent, every opportunity gone." His words hung heavy in the room. Wendy's hand gripped the podium tighter, knuckles white, and a fresh wave of tears fell. The apology she had offered already felt too small, inadequate against the losses and betrayal she had caused. The tension built as another layer of the fraud unfolded through evidence, emails, fake contracts, and misleading statements designed to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. "Your Honor," the attorney continued, "these documents prove that my clients knowingly misrepresented the facts." Wendy flinched as the words hit her ears like cold steel. She had known the risks, the moral compromises, yet had convinced herself it was all manageable until now. And then came the personal testimonies. Investors recounted how they had taken out loans, sold personal belongings, and even risked their homes because they believed in Wendy's promises. Each story, each tear shed by the victims, drove the emotional knife deeper. Wendy's sobs grew louder, body trembling, voice breaking beyond control. I don't expect forgiveness," she cried. I want to make amends in any way I can." The judge's gavel struck, momentarily pausing the chaos. "Ms. Osefo, your statements have been noted. This court recognizes the sincerity of your remorse, but the actions you committed have consequences. We will proceed accordingly." Wendy nodded, swallowing hard, trying to regain composure. Every eye in the courtroom remained fixed on her, a collective audience witnessing the raw unmasking of someone who once seemed untouchable. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed, phones flashing, microphones thrust forward, capturing every tear, every word. Social media erupted with clips of Wendy breaking down, the footage spreading faster than any publicist could spin it. Hashtags trended, comments flooded in, some sympathetic, others unforgiving. But in that courtroom, none of that mattered. Here, reality demanded confrontation, accountability, and an acknowledgement of pain inflicted. By the end of the morning session, Wendy had fully broken down, not as a reality TV star, not as a public figure, but as a human force to face the damage wrought by her own hands. Apologies had been made, tears had been shed, and the first step toward reckoning had begun. But even as the session ended, whispers of ongoing investigations, hidden assets, and potential federal implications lingered, reminding everyone that the drama was far from over. Wendy Osefo left the stand that day not just crying, but transformed. The courtroom had seen her vulnerability, her remorse, and the consequences of ambition gone unchecked. Yet the story was just beginning, because in the world of high-stakes fraud, every apology opens a door to deeper revelations, and every tear invites the question, is this the start of redemption, or merely the prelude to a more devastating fall? The courtroom had barely emptied when whispers started circulating outside. Reporters speculated, sources leaked tidbits, and social media exploded. Wendy Osefo's breakdown wasn't just a moment of personal reckoning, it was a spark that ignited a storm. Experts weighed in almost immediately. Legal analysts suggested her visible remorse might influence sentencing, while financial crime specialists pointed out that public displays of guilt often masked deeper schemes. But one thing was clear, the drama was far from over. Inside the courthouse hallways, Edward Osefo paced nervously. Every step echoed with tension, a silent rhythm of fear and anticipation. "We can't let this define us," he muttered under his breath, though his furrowed brow betrayed doubt. A court official approached him quietly, sliding a folded envelope across the table. "This came for you," the official said. Edward's hands trembled as he opened it, revealing pages of previously undisclosed evidence, bank transfers, offshore accounts, and cryptic messages between Wendy and an unknown associate. His jaw tightened. The trail of deception was deeper than anyone imagined. Meanwhile, Wendy was led to a private room for a brief debrief before the next hearing. She sat silently, staring at the floor, her body shaking from the morning's emotional storm. Her attorney, trying to maintain calm, spoke quietly. "Wendy, the new documents, they could either work against us or help show cooperation. You need to be ready." Wendy nodded, barely absorbing the words, her mind racing through a labyrinth of betrayal, fear, and regret. One of the leaked messages, allegedly between Wendy and an investor, revealed her private admission of knowing the full scope of the fraud weeks before the arrests. It painted a picture far more sinister than the public had seen, a calculated, high-stakes manipulation masked by charm and charisma. Social media erupted, users dissecting the leaked screenshots, debating whether Wendy's tears were genuine remorse or strategic damage control. The controversy multiplied overnight. Back in court, a surprise witness was called. A former associate of Wendy's, previously believed loyal, stepped forward with damning testimony. "I tried to warn her," the witness said, voice trembling with emotion. "I told her this would end in disaster, but she didn't listen. She knew the risks, and she still went through with it." Gasps filled the room. Wendy's face went pale, her earlier display of vulnerability now intersecting with fear. Betrayal wasn't just a headline, it was personal, cutting through the very foundation of trust she had built. Even outside legal circles, whispers of potential federal investigations grew louder. Anonymous sources suggested that authorities were now exploring other individuals connected to Wendy's financial empire, hinting at a web of complicity reaching far beyond what had initially been exposed. Every revelation pulled Edward and Wendy deeper into uncertainty. They had prepared for public scrutiny, but not for a cascade of exposure that threatened to dismantle everything they had controlled. By mid-afternoon, the tension reached a breaking point. Wendy, still grappling with the new evidence and the witness testimony, asked her attorney in a shaky voice, "Do we have any way to control this? Any chance to salvage what's left?" Her lawyer's response was calm but sobering, "Not entirely. All we can do now is manage the narrative, cooperate where we can, and hope the court sees your cooperation as genuine. But every move we make will be scrutinized." The day ended with the media frenzy intensifying. Headlines splashed across screens worldwide. Wendy Osefo's tears hide deeper secrets. New evidence could change everything. Fraud empire unraveled. And through it all, Wendy remained seated, alone in her thoughts, feeling the weight of every betrayal, every lie, and every consequence crashing down. By nightfall, the Osefos knew one thing with certainty: the breakdown in court was only the opening act. What came next, further testimony, potential federal charges, and leaked evidence, could shift the story entirely. And somewhere in the shadows, forces moved quietly, shaping the path of this scandal, leaving Wendy and Edward to navigate a high-stakes game of survival where every choice could mean redemption or ruin. The courtroom was silent, almost suffocating. Wendy Osefo's head hung low, her hands trembling as the judge called for order. Every eye in the room seemed to burn into her, weighing her shame, her tears, and the secrets she carried. Edward stood beside her, rigid, his jaw set, yet his eyes betrayed fear. The tension was electric, the kind that made even seasoned journalists lean forward in anticipation. Today was more than a sentencing, it was the unveiling of everything hidden, every lie, and every scheme laid bare. Suddenly, the prosecutor leaned in, voice steady but cutting. The evidence shows a deliberate pattern of deception. Over months, Wendy and Edward Osefo manipulated investors, falsified documents, and created a network to siphon millions under the guise of legitimate business. Murmurs erupted. Wendy's breath caught. She had expected the courtroom drama, the press, even the leaks, but hearing it all articulated so methodically, so mercilessly, left her raw and exposed. A witness was called next, an ex-investor whose trust had been shattered. "I trusted them," the witness said, voice cracking. "Every meeting, every promise. They looked you in the eye and smiled while stealing everything we worked for." Wendy's hand went to her face, her tears flowing freely now. I didn't. I never intended for it to go this far," she whispered, the words barely audible. But the courtroom didn't hear apologies, it only heard consequence. As the testimony continued, a new bombshell dropped. The defense table shifted as Wendy's lawyer presented a hidden trove of emails and financial records showing that some investors had been warned months prior, evidence that could reduce charges if the court considered her cooperation. The room buzzed with speculation. Was this an attempt at redemption or another layer of manipulation? Edward glanced at Wendy, a silent question in his eyes. Could they survive this, together, or would the cracks in their empire finally consume them? The tension escalated further when a surprise declaration came from an anonymous whistleblower. "There are people above the Osefos, more powerful than you realize, involved in this scheme," the statement read aloud by the clerk. "Names will remain confidential, but understand this. The game they played wasn't theirs alone." Gasps and whispers filled the room. Wendy's face turned ashen. She had thought the storm was hers and Edward's to weather alone, but now it was clear they had been pawns in something far larger and far more dangerous. The climax of the hearing approached. The judge, stern and unflinching, addressed Wendy directly. "Your tears and apologies are noted, but the law must weigh the impact of your actions against the people harmed." Wendy's chest heaved. She had cried for the courtroom, for the victims, for herself, but would it be enough? Edward's hand found hers, a brief grounding touch in the chaos. Neither of them spoke. Words had lost meaning in this moment of reckoning. Then, the unexpected happened. The prosecutor paused, glanced at the defense, and leaned forward. "We are recommending a sentence that reflects accountability, but also acknowledges cooperation." A low murmur spread across the room. Wendy's lawyer exhaled sharply, tension giving way to cautious hope. But the room remained on edge. Everyone knew that in cases like this, recommendations were just the beginning. The final verdict could change everything, and the shadows of unnamed players loomed over the proceedings like a storm waiting to strike. As the gavel came down to pause the hearing, Wendy buried her face in her hands. The courtroom emptied slowly, the press swarming outside, their phones and cameras hungry for the next clip, the next headline. Wendy and Edward were left alone in the echoing halls, grappling with the weight of exposure, the sting of public judgment, and the realization that the game they had played was bigger than they ever imagined. They had confessed, apologized, and broken down, but the fallout wasn't over. The truth, as always, had layers yet to be revealed, and one question remained. Could they survive the storm they had unleashed, or had the court merely exposed the beginning of something far darker? The suspense lingered like a shadow, the kind that whispers in your ear long after the room goes silent. One thing was certain, this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. The consequences were only just beginning. If you think Wendy Osefo's courtroom breakdown is the end of the story, think again. Secrets are still buried, names are still hidden, and the full extent of the fraud is far from revealed. What really happened behind those closed doors? Who else could be implicated? The next chapter could change everything. If you want to see the leaked documents, hear the hidden conversations, and get the inside scoop on what really went down, comment for the next video. Don't just watch, join the conversation, because the truth is only getting darker and more shocking from here.